The day Queen Jezebel died, the worst death in the Bible. Queen Jezebel's life is marked by idolatry, manipulation, and outright rebellion against God, resulting in a death so gruesome it stands as a stark reminder of divine justice, a kind of death that wouldn't amount to a burial. Jezebel's story, detailed in the books of Kings, offers a dramatic narrative that shows power, corruption, and a fateful end. This is the story of Jezebel's death. But what could make the death of an Israelite queen marked as the worst in the Bible? The reason her death is marked as the worst in the Bible is solely because of how she lived, and not just how she lived. It's all seen in what she did in Israel and against God. Jezebel was the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and she married Ahab, king of Israel. This union was not just a marriage, but a strategic alliance that brought the influence of Phoenician culture and religion into Israel. The major religion of the Phoenicians was the worship of Baal, a prominent deity in several ancient Near Eastern cultures, was primarily worshipped by the Canaanites and Phoenicians. Baal refers to the storm and fertility god. He was believed to control weather and rain. As a fertility god, Baal was believed to be directly responsible for the success of crops and livestock. His worship promised blessings of rain and bountiful harvests, which were essential for the agrarian economies of the ancient Near East, making him a crucial deity for agrarian societies. Baal's worship involves elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and sometimes even human sacrifices, to appease him and ensure prosperity and fertility for the land and people. Jezebel was a devout worshiper of Baal and Asherah, deities of her homeland, and she fervently promoted their worship in Israel, directly challenging the monotheistic worship of Yahweh. She erected altars for Baal, built an Asherah pole, and supported hundreds of prophets dedicated to these foreign gods. This aggressive promotion of idolatry stirred conflict with the prophets of God and led to a spiritual crisis in Israel. Her efforts to establish Baal worship included the carefully planned persecution of Yahweh's prophets. Jezebel ordered the killing of many prophets of God, forcing those who remained to go into hiding. This campaign of violence and suppression aimed to replace the worship of God with that of Baal, undermining the religious foundations of Israel and leading the people into idolatry. Jezebel's introduction of Baal worship to Israel was not merely a religious shift, but a direct challenge to the covenantal relationship between God and the people of Israel. Her actions led to significant conflict with the prophets of God, particularly Elijah, who stood as a staunch opponent of Baal worship. This conflict reached a dramatic climax in the showdown on Mount Carmel, where Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal and demonstrated God's power over Baal. Because of her personality, she was able to have a very strong influence over Ahab and often led him to commit heinous acts. Her ambition and ruthless pursuit of power were unparalleled. Ahab, although a king, often seemed more like a puppet under Jezebel's control. She was the driving force behind many of his worst decisions, including the systematic persecution of God's prophets. Jezebel ordered the killing of many prophets of God, leaving only a few, like Elijah, in hiding or on the run. This act of violence against God's messengers showcased her blatant defiance and her determination to replace the worship of God with that of Baal and Asherah, and this was her main goal. If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe. Moving on. One notable instance of Jezebel's ruthless ambition is the story of Naboth's vineyard, which showed her complete disregard for justice and righteousness, but also marked the beginning of the end for her. Naboth, a Jezreelite, owned a vineyard next to the palace of King Ahab. Ahab desired the vineyard to convert it into a vegetable garden and offered Naboth a better vineyard or its value in money. However, Naboth refused to sell his ancestral inheritance, adhering to the laws and traditions of Israel that prohibited the sale of family land. Ahab returned home sullen and angry because of Naboth's refusal. Seeing her husband's distress, Jezebel took matters into her own hands. She devised a sinister plan to secure the vineyard for Ahab. Jezebel wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent them to the elders and nobles of Naboth's city. She instructed them to proclaim a fast and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then, 2 scoundrels were to bring false charges against him, accusing him of cursing both God and the king. This false testimony would result in Naboth being taken out and stoned to death. The elders and nobles followed Jezebel's instructions to the letter. They proclaimed a fast, seated Naboth in a prominent place, and had the 2 scoundrels bring false charges against him. Naboth was accused of blasphemy against God and the king, and he was subsequently dragged outside the city and stoned to death. Once Naboth was dead, Jezebel informed Ahab that the vineyard he coveted was now his for the taking. Ahab, without any moral conflict, went down to take possession of the vineyard. Jezebel's actions in this incident reveals her contempt for justice and human life. She manipulated the law, orchestrated false testimony, and orchestrated an innocent man's death to satisfy Ahab's desires. This event not only shows her ruthless ambition, but also her willingness to commit murder and pervert justice for personal gain. It is a stark example of how her influence led Ahab astray, causing him to participate in terrible acts of wickedness. The story of Naboth's vineyard also brought about a prophetic response. Elijah, the prophet, confronted Ahab in the vineyard of Naboth. Elijah delivered a dire prophecy from God, condemning Ahab and Jezebel for their actions. He foretold that Ahab's dynasty would be cut off, and that dogs would devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. This prophecy set the stage for the eventual downfall of Jezebel and her family, marking the beginning of the end of their reign of terror. Jezebel's reign of terror did not go unnoticed by God and the prophets of Israel. Elijah, one of the most significant prophets of the Old Testament, stood against her. After a dramatic confrontation on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal and proved God's supremacy, and also killed the prophets of Baal, Jezebel swore to kill him when she heard of what Elijah had done, forcing Elijah to flee for his life. However, Elijah was not the man who brought about the end of Jezebel. It was Jehu, the son of Nimshi. After Elijah ran for his life, God encountered him and told him to anoint Elisha as his successor, and Jehu should be anointed as the king over Israel. God commanded Elisha to anoint Jehu as king of Israel with the specific mission of eradicating the house of Ahab, including Jezebel. Jehu's mission was clear. He was to be the instrument of divine retribution against Jezebel and her family. After God told Elisha to anoint Jehu as king, he sent a messenger to Jehu. The messenger anointed Jehu and gave him his mandate, saying, "And thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. The dog shall eat Jezebel, and the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her." After being anointed king, Jehu set out to fulfill his divine mandate. He rode to Jezreel, where Jezebel resided, his approach marked by a relentless drive for justice. On his way to the residence of Jezebel, he was encountered by 2 messengers who were sent by the king, Jeroboam, son of Ahab and Jezebel. When the first messenger came to him, asking if he had come peacefully, he answered, saying, "Do you have any business with peace?" Then it was recorded that the messenger did not return. Same with the second messenger. Then Jeroboam, the king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went to meet Jehu. He asked the same question he sent his messengers to ask, to which Jehu answered, "What peace, so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcraft are so many?" Then Jehu turned and fled, but was struck down by an arrow shot by Jehu. As Jehu entered Jezebel, ever defiant and proud, prepared herself for their meeting. She painted her eyes, adorned her head, and looked out of a window, a queen, ready to face her destiny. When Jehu arrived, she taunted him, referencing Zimri, who had assassinated his master to take the throne for personal benefits, but only lasted 7 days because he burned down the castle while he was inside. Jehu was unmoved by her taunts because he knew he wasn't there for his benefit, but for a heavenly mandate. In addition, he was already anointed as king, but Zimri wasn't anointed, so he ignored her taunts. He looked up at the window and called out, "Who is on my side? Who?" In response, 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him, answering his call that they were on his side. Jehu commanded them to throw Jezebel down. Without hesitation, they complied, and Jezebel was hurled from the window. Her body struck the wall and the ground, and the horses trampled her underfoot. Now, in Israel, throwing people off a cliff or a high-rise building is the same as stoning them to death. This simply means she was experiencing the same fate in which she put Naboth. She was getting stoned to death also. Jezebel's death was swift and brutal, but the horror did not end there. After ensuring his immediate objectives in the palace, Jehu refreshed himself, ate and drank, and then he ordered that Jezebel be buried, recognizing her royal status, aside from being a wicked and unjust woman who led the whole nation into idolatry. She was the daughter of a king. He wanted to give her a little proper farewell, forgetting what the prophet said about the body of Jezebel. However, when his men went to bury her, they found only her skull, feet, and the palms of her hands. The rest of her body had been consumed by dogs, fulfilling the prophecy spoken by Elijah. The dogs shall eat Jezebel within the bounds of Jezreel. This gruesome end was not merely a physical death, but a symbolic act of divine justice. Jezebel's body being devoured by dogs signified her complete and utter disgrace, a fitting end for a woman who had led Israel into idolatry and sin. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of turning away from God and embracing evil. Jezebel's name has endured through the centuries, becoming a symbol of wickedness and treachery. Her life and death are a testament to the themes of justice and retribution that permeate the Bible. The brutality of her end shows the severity of her actions and the divine judgment that followed. Her end was not just a punishment, but a public spectacle, a clear demonstration of divine retribution. This aligns with the broader biblical theme that God's justice is both inevitable and unmistakable. Jezebel's story, particularly her death, vividly illustrates the biblical principle that evil, no matter how powerful, will ultimately be brought to justice. Her demise was not just a personal tragedy, but a pivotal moment in the history of Israel, signaling the end of a dynasty steeped in idolatry and corruption. The day Queen Jezebel died is one of the most dramatic and horrifying episodes in the Bible. Her death, marked by violence and retribution, stands as a testament to the consequences of a life lived in defiance of divine law. Jezebel's end was indeed one of the worst deaths recorded in the Bible, a fitting conclusion to a reign of terror and idolatry. Although Jezebel exhibited some commendable attributes, like her boldness, strength, and influence, she misused all of these great attributes just to expand her tyrannical reign. In the end, justice will always prevail, and those who sow evil will reap its consequences. As we reflect on her life and death, we are urged to consider our actions and the legacy we leave behind. Jezebel's story challenges us to live righteously, to lead with integrity, and to remain faithful to the values that endure through time. If you enjoyed this video and would love to see more and better videos, please like and subscribe and turn on the notifications button. Stay safe.